All right, welcome back to another explainer. Today, we are diving into a massive, literally world-stopping cultural phenomenon. A couple of years ago, basically the entire planet paused to watch this South Korean drama called Squid Game. But listen, we aren't just going to recap the dramatic twist today. Nope. We are going to uncover the hidden psychological blueprint that made this show just so impossibly addictive. Let's get into it. I mean, really think about the premise for a second. You've got a group of people drowning in debt, and they're given a shot to play schoolyard games for a massive cash prize. The catch? Well, if you lose, you die. On the surface, it sounds completely absurd, super dark, and maybe even a little simplistic, right? So why on earth did this specific premise shatter language barriers, cross cultural divides, and resonate so incredibly deeply with audiences from literally every corner of the globe? Well, the numbers are just staggering. 330 million people tuned in. That's a mind-blowing scale. And an audience that massive tells us something really important. It tells us that this isn't just a popular TV show, it's actually a global psychological mirror. It's reflecting our shared hidden drives, our deepest anxieties, and the invisible systems that kind of just govern our daily lives without us even noticing. To find out exactly what it's reflecting, we need to look really closely at one highly specific scene in the series. So there's this blink and you miss it detail. In episode 2, when the camera pans across the desk of the front man, the guy running the games, there's a specific book sitting there, the Seminars of Jacques Lacan. Now, Jacques Lacan was this brilliantly complex and honestly notoriously dense French psychoanalyst. Reading his lectures is basically the academic equivalent of trying to solve a brutal escape room. But the creators deliberately placed his work there because Lacan's theories, they're the literal blueprint for the entire series. And to understand Lacan and figure out the game itself, we first have to look at the rules of the world we're all living in right now. See, from the moment we're born, society hands us a script. And it's presented as this perfectly straight, predictable line. You go to school, you get into a good college, land a stable corporate job, get married, buy the nice car, and finally, get the house. We're told over and over that if we just follow these exact steps, we'll cross the finish line into ultimate happiness and fulfillment. But as we see with the players in the game, and honestly, as a lot of us feel in our own lives, this straight line, it's a complete illusion. And stepping off that script or failing to follow it has absolutely brutal real-world consequences. Take South Korea, for example, which operates as this hyper-capitalist powerhouse. Sometimes it's even called the Republic of Samsung. The pressure to succeed there is just immense. To put it into perspective, in 2022 alone, there were over 13,000 suicides in South Korea. That is one human life lost every 41 minutes. The system leaves zero room for error. It's basically a fatal pressure cooker. And it perfectly sets the stage for these desperate contestants who are suddenly willing to risk absolutely everything. Which brings us to the first layer of all this, what we'll call the loop of desire. You see, the entire machine of hypercapitalism, not to mention the deadly games in the show, are actually fueled by one highly exploitable human trait: desire. But Lacan viewed desire way differently than we typically do. He coined this term the desire of the other. His argument was that we don't actually want things in a vacuum. Think about it. You don't just want a fancy car for the sake of having some metal and wheels. You want the status that car gives you in the eyes of everyone else. You want it because the other values it. Our deepest cravings are essentially programmed right into us by the society we live in. And this totally exposes the trap. We usually think of desire as a straight arrow hitting a target, right? Like, once I get the prize, I'll be happy. But Lacan said, no, human desire is actually a Mobius strip. It's an endless looping cycle. Every single time you think you've reached the end, you find yourself right back at the beginning, hungry for the next thing. This is exactly why characters in the show, even past winners like the frontman, inevitably return to the game. The itch is literally never scratched. Okay, peeling back the next layer, we run into the three worlds inside us. So the crucial thing here is understanding how this desire gets processed in our minds. Lacan proposed that human psychology is actually made up of three internal orders or worlds. And the absolute genius of Squid Game is how it visualizes these invisible psychological structures. First up, we have the imaginary order. This is our self-image, our ego, our envy. The show brings this to life through those giant, wildly colorful playgrounds and that massive dorm room where players are constantly comparing themselves to each other. Second is the symbolic order. This is the realm of language, laws, authority, what Lacan called the big other. In the series, you see this in the strict rules and the masked guards. And finally, there's the real. Now, for Lacan, the real isn't just everyday reality. It is the pure, unspeakable void. It's raw trauma. In the game, the real is the literal death, the terror, and the animalistic brutality the players face when they lose.
Let's actually zoom in on that symbolic order for a second because it governs all of us. Think about the shapes on the masks of the guards. You've got the circles, they're the workers, explaining the rules in that calm, gentle voice. The triangles are the armed enforcers, making sure everyone complies through force. And the squares, they are the managers, basically the mind of the system. Just like in our own world, where we have schools, police, and governments constantly telling us what to do, these shapes represent the rigid societal rules and hierarchies that dictate our every single move.
Which brings us to the third layer, the missing piece of the puzzle. Because honestly, if the rules are so rigid and the punishment is literal death, what keeps us and the players running in this incredibly stressful loop? Well, it's the unattainable object of desire driving the whole capitalist machine. Remember the front man's desk? Right next to Lacan's book is a volume by the surrealist painter René Magritte. You probably know his famous painting, The Son of Man, the one where a guy's face is blocked by a floating green apple. That is profoundly intentional. The apple represents desire acting as a mask. It hides the underlying emptiness, that terrifying void of the real we were just talking about. We chase desires simply to distract ourselves from that void. Lacan actually had a very specific name for this mask. He called it objet petit a, basically the object cause of desire. It's that magical, total illusion of a prize that we falsely believe will finally make us whole. For the players in Squid Game, the objet petit a is undeniably that giant, glowing piggy bank stuffed with billions of won, just hanging right there from the ceiling. They genuinely believe, with everything they have, that if they just secure that money, all their trauma, all their emptiness will just instantly vanish. And here is how hypercapitalism weaponizes this exact theory against us every single day. Just think about your smartphone. Back in 2017, the iPhone X was the objet petit a, right? You just had to have it. But by 2020, society told you the iPhone 12 was the new ultimate prize. Then it was the 15. The product constantly changes, but the void, that remains. We are kept on this endless Mobius strip of consumption, totally convinced that the very next purchase will finally be the one that fulfills us. And that leads us to the final and, frankly, darkest layer, the mirror twist. Because if the players represent this desperate, frantic pursuit of desire, who represents the end of the line? Like, what actually happens when you get everything you ever wanted? Enter the VIPs. These are the wealthy elite funding and watching the games from behind those golden animal masks. These people have accumulated so much wealth that they've achieved every conceivable material desire. But remember Lacan's rule? Desire requires the other. Because the VIPs have absolutely everything, they have no peers. They've entirely lost the desire of the other. So they're just completely empty. They are stripped of their humanity, reduced to seeking out the ultimate raw real, which is watching actual visceral human suffering just to feel a tiny fleeting spark of life again. Which brings us to an incredibly powerful takeaway. The ultimate illusion is believing that human desire can ever truly be fulfilled. The real tragedy of the show and of the hyper-capitalist systems it's critiquing is that the finish line is a total mirage. The players die trying to reach it, and the VIPs, they just rot away from the inside because they actually crossed it. But I want to leave you with one final thought here. We watch this show from the total comfort of our couches. We binge-watch violence and struggle just to escape the boredom of our own daily routines, our own symbolic rules. So I gotta ask you, are we the desperate players caught up in the system? Or, by sitting back and being completely entertained by it all, are we actually the VIPs? Let that sink in for a minute. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.